players down there at the time, and it was a great cup run culminating in a loss to Chelsea, of course, at Wembley. You know, one game away from Luton's second ever cup final and my first, but sadly it weren't to be. But if I was going to go out, I went out. I couldn't go out to a better club.
Yeah. How did you feel when you saw Chelsea come out of the hat and you'd know you'd be pitted up against your old mates?
We already knew because we still had a replay to overcome against West Ham. We drew at their place 0-0, and it was an amazing night when Scott scored the hat-trick. We beat them 3-2 at Kenilworth Road. It was an amazing night, FA Cup quarter-final. And with me knowing that Chelsea were waiting in the semi and it was going to be at Wembley, there was a bit of extra impetus, and I had a decent game, as everyone did. You'd have had to at the time to beat West Ham. They had some good players, but everyone was up for it. The crowd were brilliant. You know, the Luton crowd that night were amazing. You know, small ground, everyone doesn't like Kenilworth Road all over the country, but it generates a good atmosphere on nights like that, and that was a special atmosphere, and we got through.
Yeah. How would you have felt scoring against Chelsea, putting them out of the cup?
I was a professional. I wanted to get to a cup final. I only had one chance. Sadly, the Luton players didn't perform as they had done, and myself included, on that day, as they did in the past. And Gavin Peacock scored 2 from Tony Cascarino's 2 knockdowns, and you know, Chelsea went through, but it wasn't a classic game, and sadly Luton disappointed on the day.
Yeah.
But you know, as I say, Chelsea fans made it an amazing day for me, but sure, I would have scored.
How did the move to Millwall come about?
David Pleat called me in one day and said about Mick McCarthy wanted me at Millwall on loan, and he said he wanted to try a few new strikers out, and it was coming to the end of my contract, and he said it was in February or March, and he said, listen, go down there on loan till the end of the season and see how you get on. You know, if you do well, they'll offer you a contract, extend your career. And he pretty much said I wasn't going to get another deal at Luton. Sad, but I thought I'll have a go. Yeah. Like I said, I'm always up for the challenge, and I went down there. And when I went down there, there was when I first went out for the first game, they had a decent enough side. There was a fellow called Uwe Fuchs, a German, signed for 750,000 that summer. Chris Malkin, who's a leggy striker but a decent enough player, and they were apparently ahead of me. But nevertheless, I got the nod. I played a game. Actually, I think I've got that wrong. That was the summer they signed. Right. They were signed in the summer. I went there on loan. I went straight into the side. I can't remember who we played, but I scored. We won 1-1. But there was shouts of scummer and all that, you know, coming from the terrace. Not everywhere. Some were clapping and some were scummer in it and all. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what have I done? And but nevertheless, I scored, and you know, it was a muted applause sort of thing. They didn't know whether to clap or cheer. But my loan period, I started well because you know, the team started winning games, and we did all right. It wasn't so bad. We had some great players. I say great players. Again, the word, you know, I'm perhaps overboard, but we had some very, very good players. You know, in that side, Ben Thatcher, Pikey Stevens, you know, Keith Stevens, Pikey in midfield. You know, players who are honest, good players. You know, and you know, it was a decent side, and we played some decent football, and I gradually won the fans over. I think Mick McCarthy was the one that I needed to win over. Of course, he gave me a deal in the summer, which wasn't sure about, but he gave me a 2-year deal, which was amazing for me.
Yeah.
Stayed, started the season very well. Uwe Fuchs came, as I say, in the summer, 750,000. Chris Malkin came. I knew my chances would be limited because they were signings, but I was prepared to battle, and we did really well first half of the season. He was rotating the strikers. You know, I was a veteran at the time, but when I went on, I was doing well, and I scored goals, and I was matching pace with the other two. Yeah. I mean, certain Millwall fans thought that I should be in the side ahead of either one or both of them, and should be in, but it wasn't to be. Mick after Christmas decided to sign 2 Russian internationals who were supposedly coming to boost the club. They went out on a limb as far as money's concerned, which a lot of the players there resented.
Yeah.
It became public that they were earning huge money, whatever, why or what, I don't know. But we were top of the league at the time, just after Christmas. And, well, of course, one of them, Sergei Urin, I think his name was. Uran, I think that was his name. Yeah. He was a striker. Well, of course, all of a sudden I wasn't going to be getting the games. I was amazed that they changed it. But sadly, I left the club. I was told that Watford wanted me. And, that was a bit of a wrench, really, for me, because being a Luton boy, Luton and Watford rivals, it was a move, should I make it, shouldn't I, but it was 20 minutes from my home. I was commuting through the Blackwall Tunnel pretty much every day, leaving, and I thought it was an opportunity to, a bit of home comforts and a 2-year deal.
Yeah. And
so I left, and I looked for Millwall's results, and I was absolutely gutted that they got relegated that same year.
Yeah. How did the Watford fans react to you signing, obviously coming with
they hated me. They was a phone in the night before I played. They booed me when I come out before the warm-up, before I'd even kicked a ball. And if I thought a few scummer shouts at Millwall was bad, my goodness me. But I didn't play too many times at Watford. I tried.
Yeah.
I even have Luton fans saying to me, "What you doing signing for them?" And at the end of the day, you do what you have to do. I'm professional football. I want to prolong my career. I'm offered a 2-year deal, and the reality is that you have to put food on the table, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
And that's what I had to do, so that's why. It didn't last too long because Glenn Roeder, the man that signed me, was sacked I think 2 or 3 games later, and maybe that was the final nail in his coffin, signing me. But nevertheless, that happened, and Graham Taylor came in. I never really featured much after that, and Graham, to be fair, told me these stories, but he gave me my opportunity to go to Doncaster as a player manager.
Yeah.
He didn't know I was going to Doncaster, but I told him that I was talking to someone. He said, "If you can get yourself fixed up, I'll let you go." And once I said, "I'm fixed up if you let me go," he released me from a contract, and I went up to Doncaster to be player manager in a hope that I could be a manager and start of a new career and stay in football.
Yeah. How aware are you of the crowd, and is it that easy to pick out on individual sort of cries and shouts, and does it affect your game when you hear it?
Well, ultimately it could affect your game, but I'm too thick-skinned for that. I used to get taunted at every away ground, pretty much.
Yeah.
But it didn't matter. It was one of the things you become immune to as a player. You just get on with it. Yeah. But you don't like to hear it. But as a pro, you've got to earn your living. You've got to go and do what you have to do. I wasn't all right with it. It'd be wrong to say I loved it.
Yeah.
I'd have preferred it if your home fans cheer you. But in that situation, I put up with it, and I understood why.
Yeah. Going on to the Doncaster bit, Kerry, and obviously you picked up the role of being player manager. How different was it having to have the burden of being the club's manager as well as a player? How did you cope with that?
Well, it was a burden because the chairman, or he wasn't the chairman, the benefactor at the time was used to running the side. I came in, decided to do it my way, got the players on my side, had a wonderful rapport. The time I spent at Doncaster with the players was absolutely fantastic, but the interference from the benefactor and some of the stories that went on there was incredible. And if that's the side of football management, and well, they're welcome to it. I mean, I'm a strong character, but I would have even met him halfway to a degree, but he was overbearing, and he always had the threat of Doncaster, who needed his money. He weren't going to put in, the club couldn't survive without him, and so it was a case of I had to pull a player in once and say either I had to leave him out or he weren't going to get his money this week, because the benefactor would say that there ain't enough money to pay him.
Yeah.
It was a scandalous situation, and it obviously came to a head because I declared exactly what was going on to the newspapers, and there was uproar in the club. And the club then went into administration not long after, and I left. I negotiated my release after that. But the time I had at Doncaster, I met some wonderful people in terms of the players. The fans ultimately treated me nice. They treated me with respect, and I think I'd always be welcome back up there for pretty much exposing what was going on at the club. I brought it to a head, and I met John Ryan, the chairman now. At the time, and he's a friend of mine, and for the good of Doncaster Rovers, John Ryan took over, and it really was a blessing for Doncaster when he finally bought the club.
Yeah. With that experience and obviously your first taste of management, Kerry, has it put you off long term of ever getting back involved in managing if the opportunity come up to manage a fairly big club?
It didn't put me off, but I mean, I went non-league. I went to Boreham Wood and had 2.5 great years there, successful years, and I went to Letchworth and Hitchin as manager, and then to Dunstable as manager in non-league. But I now apply my trade in other areas in terms of football punditry, commentary, and events and dinners and so on, and media work generally.
Yeah.
So, but I think management has now passed me by. But that was the time in my life. If things would have gone right, then I'd have been prepared for the management role. And I'd like to think, and I always believe that given a chance, I might have done it all right. But that wasn't to be the case. And circumstances dictated that I had to do things a certain way. Yeah. As it was, you lead your life as it is, and what happens in your life and how it goes will dictate. And things dictated to me, and so I had to go where the food was on the table. And Chelsea came along and offered me various roles. I'm now doing the hospitality there, and I'm doing commentary there, and involved in Chelsea TV and so on. So that's where perhaps my future lies, until of course someone else comes along and says, here's something, have a go at that, and once again I'll be up for the challenge.
Yeah. Who's the best manager you ever worked with?
John Neal. Purely from the point of view that he was the man that signed me for Chelsea. Maurice Evans was great, by the way. I loved him. But people always got the best out of me. People who had faith in me, and I was always determined to repay that faith, and hence the two names of John Neal and Maurice Evans would come up.
Yeah. Who's the funniest character you ever played with?
It's a tough call. There's a few characters. Ian Dowie springs to mind. Met him at Southampton, funny guy. Andy Townsend, brilliant one-liners. Dennis Wise, David Speedy, all characters. Perry Groves, funny guy as well. Down at Southampton, had some good times. But football dressing room as a whole is about a laugh, and if the camaraderie and the spirit is right, you wouldn't pick out any individual, because it's always about situations, and there's always a situation in a football dressing room.
Yeah, yeah. You obviously played with a Millwall legend, Terry Hurlock, at Southampton. What was he like off the pitch? Terry
was a great guy. I mean, he's still a good friend of mine, Terry. He had his fight with Speedo down in the Isle of Wight. But Terry was a great guy. They're two fiery guys. Speedo more fiery than him, but nevertheless, the two of them clashed over an issue, and it was quite a hairy moment. But Terry's a good friend of mine. I still see him socially, and I think he's a wonderful character.
Yeah, yeah. What used to be the toughest away grounds to play at?
Well, the ones, I'm a believer in, let's say, superstitions and so on. The toughest away grounds were always the ones we never won at. Leeds United was Chelsea had a poor record there, although I scored there for Southampton, one of my 2 goals that I got. Ellen Road was always tough. The Old Den was a place to, I'm not going to say to play at, it was a fearful place to visit. But I have memories of a wonderful hat-trick there. Last game of the season, 89, 90. So, it's one of them things. Wasn't necessarily a bad place to play at, but for different reasons, it was a fearful place. But Leeds United was tough in terms of getting a result. And I'm just trying to think of other grounds that we pretty much struggled at. But Leeds is definitely one that Chelsea as a whole struggled.
Yeah. How do you like being famous? Do you like